Okay, so for this part of the lesson, scatter plots, there's quite a bit of information. This might be a little bit new to you, but that's okay. A scatter plot is basically a graph where you're trying to compare two variables. So when I was drawing our x and our y before, those are our two variables. And we want to see if there's a relationship between them. After we put dots all over the graph, we'd like to see if there's some sort of a trend or a pattern. So what I have here is, do you see this line right here? That's actually this part of the x. And then this line right here is this part of the y. So we actually only focus on this part for our scatter plots, and we don't really look at these two anymore. Okay, so it's just the same Cartesian plane, but it's just set up a little bit differently. I'm going to go through all the features. The axes, which is our vertical, that was our y, which I already drew. And then the horizontal axis is our x. So I drew those already. But in a scatter plot, you have to label them. So the labels mean there are two labels. Here are our x's and here are our y's. Now, how did I know that? I'll explain to you in a little bit. But the word year, you want to label along the x-axis right here. And rural population, you want to label along the y-axis right there. Okay? So that's what they mean by creating labels for our axes. You want to put the words down. Now the scale. Each of these are going to be data points, so dots on the graph. But we need some sort of scale. Now remember, those are the numbers along each of the axes. So we're going to need numbers on each of these lines that will help us to plot our points. And here is the most important thing. When you do your scale, all of those blocks that you see have to separate at the same amount each time. Okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. Once we have our scale down, you're going to dot all the data points. So each of these guys is actually our x and then our y. So that's actually like one dot on the graph. Whereas these two are going to create another dot on the graph. And so you're just going to end up having a lot of dots, and you're going to see if there's some sort of connection or pattern between your x and your y. Lastly, you're going to have a title. So you just write the title up there, and it has to do with, you know, what we're actually talking about. So a good title in this case might be Rural Populations from the year 1950 to 1970. So it's just like a really short title to tell everybody what we're actually talking about. All right, now I had said that years goes here and population goes here. And I said I'd explain why in a second. So here it comes. We're going to talk about this section now. All right, so independent variable versus the dependent variable. An independent variable is one of the variables that they mention that will be independent of anything else. It's kind of like the cause, whereas the dependent variable is controlled by the independent variable, and it's actually like the effect that happens because of the independent variable. The IV, which is the independent variable, we always write on the x-axis. The dependent variable, which depends on the independent variable, so the dv, we always write on the y-axis. Now, let me give you some examples so that you can tell which one is which. If we were given a question and they were talking about the number of hours studying versus the marks on a test, which one would be your independent and which one would be your dependent? Well, the marks depend on how much you've studied. That makes sense, right? Like, your marks in your class depend on how much you've been studying the day before. If you don't study a lot, you're not going to see very good marks. But if you study a lot, you're going to see your marks go up. So this one is affected by the cause. So remember, the effect is a dependent. Here's another one. Number of hunters and rabbits. So the population of the rabbits depends on the number of the hunters, which is independent. It doesn't make sense to say it the other way around. The hunters don't depend on the rabbits. The number of rabbits will depend on the hunters. So going back to our example for a second, the population is going to depend on what year it is, not the other way around. So if this is the dependent variable, that's going to go on our y-axis, which you see in orange on the up and down. Years and time is always independent, and so the independent variable is in green. It's always going to go on the horizontal. So I've labeled my axes. I have my title at the top. Remember that we need a scale. Okay, so all of these years, what I'm going to do, and is it looks like it goes up by 5, so that's nice. It goes up by the same amount each time, which means I can just write them right here, 1950, 1955, 1960, and then I'm going to keep going up. If you want to space it out a little bit more, you can. You can go every 2 blocks, 1950, 1955, 1960. It's up to you. Just make sure that you get to 1970. All right. Now the population, that one's going to be a little bit more tricky. Do not do this. Don't put 24,000 here and then 26,000 and then 30,000 here. Don't do that. That is very wrong. Okay, the reason why it's wrong is because these don't go up by the same amount each time, and they have to. Okay, so I want you to take a look at the lowest number, and that's this one. That's the smallest one, so if we start at 0 for the population, maybe you want to, put 24,000 here, or something like that. And we add a little bit of a break. You can if you want to, you don't have to. But what the break or the lightning bolt means is that I'm skipping from 0 to 24. And after 24,000, I'm just going to go in order. 25,000, 26,000, 27,000. I'm sorry if that's really messy, but I'm trying to write each of the numbers along the lines. But notice that I'm going up by 1,000 each time, and I'm hoping to get to 37,000. So this is what it looks like. And notice that I did get from 24,000 to 37,000. I was able to fit it in, which is great. And now we're going to plot our points. Okay, so the very first point, let me just go back here for a second, is 1950 and 37,000. So this is our x and this is our y. Okay, so starting from the origin, we're going to go to 1950. We're going to go all the way up to 37,000, and then we're going to put our dot. So don't draw those arrows because they're distracting, and just the one dot. All right, now you're going to go through each of those and draw the other dots. So 1955 was 3350, 33,500 might be somewhere there. And then 1960 was 30,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I am not along the right line. 1955, there we go, 33,500. 1960 was at 30,500, so maybe right here. And 1965 is 26,500, and then 1970 is 24,000. There we go. So those are our 5 dots that we have from our table before, and you'll notice that they actually create some sort of a pattern. It looks like as the years go by, our pattern is going down. So you could actually talk about a trend here. Don't draw the arrows. Just talk about the trend and say, oh, as the years go by, your rural population is decreasing. Sorry, I think it erased off one of my dots. All right, so what I'd like you guys to try is try this example on your own. It's talking about the years and the number of cars sold. You know what? I'll even help you out a little bit. Okay, so the years is going to be our independent because the number of cars that you sell is going to depend on the year. So remember your title. Remember to put a scale that goes up by the same amount each time. And then I think there was a final question. They want to see if you know if there's a trend. Okay, so I'd like you to maybe pause right here, try it on your own, and I will give you the answers. Okay, but try it on your own first. Here are the answers. There you go. So I have all of the years down. I have my title. I've plotted all of my points. And just again, make sure that these guys go up by the same amount. So 600, 650, 700, 750, and so on. All right, and it looks like there is a trend because as the years go by, it looks like the dots are going down. So I decided to say, don't draw those lines again. It seems like the trend is as the years go by, the number of cars sold decreases. So this is a very good sentence to write in order to describe the pattern that you see. Okay, so that's it for lesson 4.3. I'm going to also post a lesson for 4.4.